Okay, yesterday we were learning about Pesach Sheni. Today we're starting a new malacha today. After the malacha of tying and untying, the next malacha we're going to learn is what's called tzeveya. The tzeveya is dyeing, but not D-I-E, D-Y-E, coloring, dyeing. In the Mishkan, where do we find that in the Mishkan? In the Mishkan they used to dye the various skins with the various different dyes, sheish, vagaman, all the various different colors that they did. So now, again, the definition of coloring is very interesting. What's the difference between writing and coloring? Why isn't writing also coloring? We take a pen, we learned previously that writing, you write two letters, you're chayiv, that's called writing on Shabbos, right? So why isn't that also coloring? Why isn't that, you write in black on white? Why isn't that a level of coloring? So the difference, the Mepharshim explained, the difference between writing and coloring is as follows. When you write on a piece of paper, the main thing is not to better the paper. You're not making the paper any better by writing on it. You need to form letters. In order to form letters, you need to have a paper that you write it on. So therefore, the paper is enhancing the letters. It's not the letters enhancing the paper. By coloring, when you color a piece of paper, whatever material that we'll learn about, so then you're enhancing the paper, you're enhancing the material, rather than enhancing the letters that you're coloring or whatever it is. But that's the difference between writing and coloring. So there's writing, which is one malacha, and coloring is another malacha. Now we learned already in the laws of Shabbos that in order to be biblically obligated, that it should be asim in atayda, as the expression goes, it has to be anything which is permanent. Anything which is temporary is not biblically forbidden. There's a few exceptions to that. If you water the lawn, yeah, you're planting, you're right. So, but generally speaking, like writing has to be a writing that's miskayim, it lasts. Like we learned, if you write on the window that's fogged up, you write two letters, that's not biblically forbidden because it's not going to last. Even though the Rambam writes if you write on your skin, interesting, we'll get about coloring on the skin soon, but if you write on your skin, the Rambam says you're chayiv for writing. Let's say if somebody on the skin writes two letters, aleph, beis, or A-B. Okay, so then you consider writing. You wrote two letters, it's biblically writing. Even though eventually, as we know, the oils and whatever, the things on the hand make it disappear after a while, but it doesn't disappear right away. It can last for days. And unless if you wash your hand, that writing can last for days or weeks, whatever. So, but nevertheless, when it comes to coloring also, coloring is biblically forbidden when it's a coloring that's made to last. Now, what is the definition of made to last when it comes to Shabbos? Doesn't mean a year, doesn't mean a week, doesn't mean a day. So there's two opinions in halacha, which is very interesting. One opinion says that what's called miskayim, what's called permanent, so to speak, is if it will last for that Shabbos. If it will last for that Shabbos, it's called permanent. Other opinions say no, they're more lenient. It has to be coloring that will last beyond Shabbos, and extended, not forever, but it has to be an extended period of time. But the other opinion says it has to last at least for Shabbos. So the poskim Shchonarach had asked a very interesting question on that. That means I can write 1 minute before Shabbos is out, and then it has to last until Shabbos is over. But if I write Friday night, it has to last 24 hours. So that's like a joke. Which one is it? Because let's say it will last 10 hours, yeah? So if I did it Friday night, it's not going to be permanent because it's not going to last for Shabbos. But if I did it 10 minutes before Shabbos is over, so then it will last for Shabbos. So they ask, how can you categorize that way? But the bottom line is, we're strict that if it's going to last for Shabbos, it's considered biblically forbidden to color on Shabbos. Okay.
Is it more than one letter? Is still
coloring has nothing to do with the amount of letters. Writing has to do with two letters.
What about if you do one letter?
If you color any amount, even one letter, it's called coloring. Coloring doesn't only mean writing. Okay, we'll discuss. If you take, you make Kiddush, okay? And your hands get wine colored. And now you take a napkin and wipe your hand. So the napkin turned purple, right? Is that called coloring? Well, but if you think about it, you're coloring the napkin. Or which is another issue, we're not going to get there today. But for instance, you have a cloth napkin. Okay, now you have, let's say, a white cloth napkin or a white disposable napkin, right? So now, if I dry my hands, is it better to dry my hands with it's full of wine or any other colored substance that I have? Is it better to do it on a disposable napkin, or is it better to do it on a cloth napkin? Because the cloth napkin is not getting ruined as much as the napkin is. So we'll get there. But this coloring could be very broad. Putting on makeup is coloring. You have a lot of dinim that apply on Shabbos, what is considered coloring and temporary coloring and permanent coloring. But it's totally, today it's really irrelevant because even temporary coloring is still rabbinically forbidden. Minat Torah, biblically, it's only if it's a permanent writing. But if it's temporary, it's still rabbinically forbidden. So it doesn't really matter today. You don't get stoned.
What about if you put white wine and then you put red wine over it, it becomes that other color?
We're going to talk about that. Can you dip your challah into wine? Can you put ketchup on your challah? If you're having noodles, can you put ketchup into your noodles, or is that coloring the noodles? So the answer to that question, which is a very basic halacha, the halacha is ein tzviya ba'ichlin. When it comes to food, there's no coloring. Chacham said there is no such thing as coloring by food. So therefore, think about it. How can you make a cup of tea? You're coloring the water. How do you make a cup of coffee? You're coloring the water. How can you use mustard, ketchup, anything by food, right? How can you do anything on Shabbos? So the rule is, ein tzviya ba'ichlin. There's no coloring when it comes to food. That's the halacha, period. There are opinions, even though we don't paskin like that, but there are opinions that say that's only if you're adding the color in the food for taste. But what happens if exactly the case you said, what happens if somebody is adding, like they want to make, it's preferable to make Kiddush on red wine. Because there's a pasuk, there's a lot of inyanim of red wine, okay? So what happens, the guy likes white wine. They like white wine better, but they want to make it red a little bit. So they'll fill up a cup almost to the top with white wine, and then they'll add a little bit of red wine. So now the wine turns red. So there are opinions in halacha, by the way, we don't pass on like that, but there are opinions in halacha that say you can't do that on Shabbos. Because you're not doing it for the food. Like this, when you add color to the food, you're doing it for the taste. You're adding ketchup to noodles or tea or coffee to water, you're doing it for the taste, for the food. Here you're not doing it for the taste of the food. You're doing it because you want red wine, so therefore it's only for the color. So there are opinions in halacha that say you can't. But we don't pass on like that. We hold that you could. Most people say that you're allowed to do it. Which would even be better, by the way, which would be a different way. If you want to do that, even though the other opinions wouldn't have a problem with it. Normally, if you want to make your white wine red, right, you fill it up with white wine, and then you add a little bit of red. But if you put the red wine in first, then you're not coloring anything. Because the red wine is there. Now I'm adding white wine. I'm not coloring the white wine. The red is there already. So I'm adding to make the cup full or whatever. But there's a lot of issues with coloring, and that they're much more practical than we might think that they are. Okay, so for instance, You can't add color to an existing, by the way, let me tell you one more thing, interesting din. Let's say you have cloth napkins. Halacha says if you need to, you can use them. It's preferable to use disposable napkins. But what happens though, if you have your hands dirty with wine, so it's purple, halacha says it would be better not to use a purple napkin. Because now the purple on your hand is enhancing the napkin rather than making it dirty. When you take a white napkin, a cloth napkin, and you wipe your hands with ketchup or whatever, so you're ruining the cloth. I mean, it has to be washed. But if you're using a purple napkin for purple wine, so then you're not really ruining the napkin, you're enhancing it. So that could be a little bit worse, poskim, right, in these things. But then again, there's a lot of, or adding color to an existing picture, painting, dyeing, to produce dyes on Shabbos. You can't do color things. I'll give you, what? We'll learn that later. I can't learn all coloring in one day. We can color you beautiful in one day, but not all the dinim of this one day. There's a big question about taking a suntan on Shabbos because you are coloring yourself. But for instance, there's you're doing something now. No, there's so many. I'll give you another example, which would be a problem. Sometimes people have these decanters. Okay, it's not to drink from. I forgot what they're called. It's like a vase that they have certain compartments in it. So in one you add red, you dye water red and green and yellow. It's supposed to be decorative. So you know what I mean? They have this vase that they have different compartments and people put dye into the water to make it red. You know what I'm talking about? It's not so hard to understand. So that over there, that would be forbidden on Shabbos to do because it's not food. You're not drinking it. You're just coloring something. Then you're coloring water. So that would be coloring because there's nothing to do with the drinking or eating or anything of the food. It's something to beautify something. That would be an issue with coloring. Shabbos. Again, it's rabbinically, it's not biblical, but still, it would still be forbidden. Okay, you can't add paint to anything, you can't dye your hair, you can't dye your wigs, you can't dye leather, you can't do any dyeing of any material on Shabbos. Okay, Okay, so now the question is, what happens if your coloring is actually ruining it? Okay, so give me an example. If somebody is bleeding, okay, not life and death, not bleeding to death, they're just bleeding, okay, and you want to stop the bleeding. So again, even though the blood is actually ruining it, but if you take a red towel to stop the bleeding, it could be a problem. If you take, the best thing would be to take disposable something. But if not, it says in halacha clearly you can use any cloth, even a red cloth in that case if you need to. But then when you're coloring it though, and you're putting the napkin on the blood, on the bleeding to stop it, so you're basically ruining the napkin. Or even if it's a cloth napkin, if there's nothing else to use, you can use it because you're ruining it. What?
Even if it's red or purple and you're using the purple napkin, isn't it just certain areas that get more purple?
Yeah, but you're not ruining it. You're enhancing that particular area. You can't color part of a garment either. So here you're coloring, let's say
Isn't that ruining the standard garment?
No, that particular part of the garment you're enhancing.
So with if I put white out on a shirt, that's enhancing the garment? Or
if what?
If I put white out, that's going to destroy the garment. It's not making it more white.
It's still making it more white. You're not ruining the shirt as much if you put red on it.
You're
Now,
right.
if it's a completely different color, right, maybe it will be different. But usually it's not like that. Okay, Machashin is no meisem mein kim shibla gal teira beganan me kashim erat gebor zak stovi